Part 1. The Sun King. In 1661, King Louis XIV took direct control of France, one of the largest and strongest countries in 17th century Europe. A population of 19 million people meant that Louis XIV collected more money in taxes than any other ruler in Europe. Louis XIV used this wealth to strengthen the government and the army to the point of admiration and jealousy among other European monarchs. As an absolute monarch, Louis had final say in all the affairs of his country, but he also relied on skilled ministers. Jean-Baptiste Colbert improved financial records and encouraged trade and industry to increase royal income. This allowed Francois-Michel de Louvois to expand and improve the army, which grew to more than 300,000 soldiers at its height. Changes to pay, ranks, movement, lodging, campaign length, and ammunition helped its effectiveness. Louis linked France's success to his own reputation and prestige, which could be enhanced through the glory of war. After Spain's King Philip IV died in 1665, Louis claimed parts of the Spanish Netherlands, modern-day Belgium, through his wife, Mary Theresa, who was Philip's daughter. Spain rejected the claim, but France won several victories in the resulting War of Devolution. However, the Dutch Republic, England, and Sweden forced Louis to give back much of his gains in the 1668 Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle. 4 years later, England and France went to war with the Dutch Republic. French forces invaded through the Rhine River and nearly defeated the Dutch. William, the Prince of Orange, quickly became the Republic's leading stadtholder and managed to stem the tide. Exhaustion on both sides led to peace at Nijmegen in 1678, though Europe now began to see France as a threat. The treaties of Nijmegen and Westphalia in 1648 both used unclear wording. They gave towns and nearby lands to rulers, but did not clearly define which exact lands belonged with them, leading to different interpretations of the treaties. Alsace was a major problem. France received much of it after Westphalia, but the treaty did not clearly explain France's rights there. During the Franco-Dutch War, enemy forces also used Alsace to invade France. Louis recognized 3 natural frontiers that helped to defend France from her enemies: the Rhine, the Alps, and the Pyrenees. With Alsace controlling access to the Rhine, French military engineer Sébastien Leprest, the Marquis of Vauban, wanted to include the region in a strong network of frontier border fortresses. To support French claims, Louis created special courts called Chambers of Reunion. These courts studied old records and used them to justify taking more land. In 1680, a chamber in Brissac claimed most of Alsace except Strasbourg and Mulhouse. On September 30th, 1681, French troops entered Strasbourg without resistance. That same day, France gained Cassel in northern Italy through an agreement with the Duke of Mantua. Another chamber in Metz then claimed most of Luxembourg, which belonged to Spain. In the winter of 1681 and 82, starving Spanish forces in Luxembourg broke the French blockade of the city to find food. French commander Louis-François de Barfleur responded by bombarding Luxembourg City. The fighting paused in 1683 when the Ottomans attacked Vienna. Louis chose not to attack fellow Christians during the crisis, but he also did not send aid. After the Ottomans were beaten in September, the war resumed and evolved into brutal raids, reprisals, and forced payments from both sides. The Truce of Ratisbon in August 1684 let France keep Strasbourg, Luxembourg, and most of its recent territorial gains, while returning a few occupied towns in Flanders to Spain. At this peak of power, Louis turned against his own people. He wanted everyone in France to follow the same religion, Roman Catholicism. However, some 1.5 million Protestants, called Huguenots, also lived in the kingdom. The Huguenots had been loyal since their last revolt in 1629, and had gained success through education, trade, and industry. The Catholic Church thus wanted their influence removed, and encouraged Louis to act with promises of financial support. Starting in the 1660s, Louis passed laws that slowly stripped Protestant rights. He limited Protestant worship, blocked career opportunities for non-Catholics, rewarded converts to Catholicism, and seized property from people who returned to Protestantism. Louis also had soldiers live in Huguenot homes. The first of these dragonnades took place in Poitou in 1681, where families were treated so badly that protests spread across Protestant Europe. But the cruelty was the point. If Huguenot families converted to Catholicism, these robbers and abusers would finally leave. Believing his policy had worked, Louis revoked the Edict of Nantes in October 1685, which had protected Protestants for nearly a century. The new Edict of Fontainebleau banned Protestant worship, destroyed churches, expelled pastors who refused to convert, and made it illegal for Huguenots to leave France. Even so, about 200,000 Huguenots escaped to Protestant countries such as Brandenburg, England, and the Dutch Republic. France lost countless skilled workers, soldiers, sailors, officers, and business leaders, causing industries and the effectiveness of the army to decline. Huguenot refugees also spread stories of their mistreatment, only increasing anti-French sentiment amongst her enemies. After the Truce of Ratisbon and the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, the balance of power slowly shifted against France. William of Orange wanted to combine Dutch money and naval strength with the armies of Austria and the German states in an alliance against France. He also wanted Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I to stop fighting the Turks in Hungary and focus on French expansion near the Rhine River. The first step towards this was taken in July 1686 with the formation of the League of Augsburg, allying Austria, several German states, Spain, and Sweden. In late 1686, Leopold's armies covered Buda in Hungary, and later defeated the Ottoman Turks near Mohacs in August 1687. After this loss, the Janissaries rebelled and removed Sultan Mehmed IV in favor of his brother. The Ottoman Empire struggled for another year, while Leopold's armies pushed farther into the Balkans. Many Protestant and Catholic rulers praised Leopold for defending Christian Europe, while criticizing Louis for his lack of action. Because of this, German states such as Brandenburg Prussia, Saxony, and Bavaria moved closer to Leopold. Even rulers along the Rhine began to question their support for the French. In 1688, Maximilian Henry, the pro-French elector of Cologne, became seriously ill. This worried Louis, who feared that Leopold might unite a now undistracted Germany and turn against France. Louis also feared that this united Germany could try to take back the lands and gains France had won earlier. On June 3rd, 1688, Elector Maximilian Henry died. Louis backed Cardinal Wilhelm Egon von Fürstenberg to become the Elector. William, Leopold, and Bavaria backed Joseph Clemens, the dead Elector's brother. Neither candidate won enough votes, so the decision went to Pope Innocent XI. Because the Pope and Louis had a poor relationship, Joseph Clemens was chosen. When Brandenburg troops entered Cologne to support him, Louis and his advisors knew for sure that they had to act before France lost its advantage. On September 24th, Louis issued the Memoire de Raison. He gave German states 3 months to accept French gains from the War of the Reunions, and to support Fürstenberg as Elector of Cologne. But that very same day, before the ultimatum could even be read, French troops entered Cologne and attacked Philipsburg. Philipsburg guarded Alsace and controlled movement along the Upper Rhine. After weeks of trenches and fighting, Philipsburg surrendered on October 30th. At the same time, William invaded England. King James II was the Catholic king of a Protestant England and Scotland, and his push for Catholic tolerance often broke laws and angered Parliament. William was his son-in-law, married to his daughter Mary, who stood next in line to the throne. In June 1688, James had a son, pushing Mary and William out of the succession. Many in England feared a Catholic future, and nobles invited William to take the throne instead. Not only frustrated that his wife was pushed aside, William also feared James might join Louis in another invasion like 1672. While France attacked Philipsburg, William gathered 1,500 soldiers and 463 ships. They landed in Devon on November 5th, and James II fled to France a month later. Part 2. Everything must be burned. After taking Philipsburg, French forces advanced through the Rhineland. Mannheim fell after a short siege, helped by an unpaid and therefore unreliable garrison. Frankenthal, Kaiserslautern, Worms, Heidelberg, Speyer, Mainz, and Bingen soon followed. Koblenz refused to surrender, so French forces bombarded it in November. Louis felt like the campaign was already over, but the Holy Roman Empire was encouraged by Leopold's earlier victories, and would not stand for the French incursion. Brandenburg, Hanover, Hesse-Kassel, Saxony, and Bavaria assembled 20,000 soldiers in Frankfurt, forcing French commander Louis-François de Barfleur to pull back to Koblenz. By December, the Empire declared France an enemy. If Germany could not be subdued, then it would have to be punished. As it became clear that the war would be long and difficult, Louvois ordered a harsh scorched earth policy in the Palatinate to slow enemy armies. French forces burned towns, broke walls, and destroyed supplies, taking money from the ruins to pay for the war. The destruction also spread into Württemberg. Stuttgart, Esslingen, and Tübingen were looted. Heilbronn lost its walls. Heidelberg burned, though residents saved most of the city by preparing buckets of water before the French arrived. Mannheim, on the other hand, was leveled like a field. Some commanders worried that damaging such historical cities would harm Louis's reputation, but the Sun King did not really care. Worms, Oppenheim, and Speyer were put to the torch in May 1689. French soldiers often looted homes, drank stolen wine, and harmed civilians during the chaos. German pamphlets called the French cannibals and described Louis as a tyrant. Public anger grew across Germany and Europe alike, and on May 12th, Leopold formed the Grand Alliance to push France back to its borders as they were in 1661. William, now King William III of England and Scotland, accepted the invitation to join. By joining the Grand Alliance, the Dutch also agreed to support Leopold's claims to the Spanish inheritance. In May 1689, Louis's niece, Queen Marie Louise of Spain, died without children. King Charles II then married Mary Anna of Neuburg, a sister-in-law of Leopold. French agents in Madrid claimed that someone had poisoned Marie Louise, but Spain still joined the Grand Alliance anyways. Soon after, Duke Victor Amadeus II of Savoy also joined because he was frustrated by French depredations on his lands. With France and Spain now at war, the Duke of Lumiere tried to invade the Spanish Netherlands, but the many forts in Flanders slowed him down and stopped major gains. Allied troops led by George Frederick, the Prince of Waldeck, spent the summer gathering supplies and fighting only small battles. France's biggest problem remained in the Rhineland. By summer, about 150,000 Allied soldiers stood in the region. In July, a German army of 60,000 surrounded and cut off the city of Mainz. Around 8,000 French defenders fought hard in trenches, tunnels, and damaged walls. After the Germans broke through the defenses, the French surrendered on September 8th. Even so, the French had kept the enemy busy for the whole campaign season. In other areas, France had mixed success. The Duke of Duras invaded enemy lands, collected payments, and disrupted supply lines in Württemberg. Barfleur captured the fortress of Aughrim, west of Koblenz, after tough fighting. Allied forces under the Elector of Brandenburg captured Kaiserwerth and later Bonn. By the end of 1689, France had lost more territory than it gained in the Rhineland, but Allied armies still failed to invade France itself. France started its 1690 campaign in the Spanish Netherlands with two armies. One army, led by Barfleur, operated between the Meuse and Moselle rivers. A larger army, led by the talented and renowned François-Henri de Montmorency, the Duke of Luxembourg, controlled the west. Waldeck moved to Genappe and tried to divide the French forces. Luxembourg reacted by marching south, crossing the Sambre River with 35,000 troops, and faced Waldeck's 38,000 soldiers near Fleurus. At the Battle of Fleurus on July 1st, Waldeck placed his army behind a stream for protection. Instead of attacking from the front, Luxembourg secretly divided his army and attacked both flanks of the Allied line. Waldeck noticed the threat too late, and the Allied line broke apart. The Allies lost about 19,000 men killed, wounded, or captured, around half their army. The French lost about 6,000. France also attacked other Spanish lands. In Catalonia, the Duke of Noailles took advantage of a peasant revolt that began in 1687. He entered Catalonia with 9,000 soldiers, and quickly captured Camprodon in May. But in August, the Spanish Duke of Villahermosa arrived with 20,000 soldiers, and forced Noailles to retreat to Roussillon. At the same time, Fighting spread to Italy after French forces took control of much of Savoy. French General Nicolas Catinat extorted money, animals, and grain from local towns and sent them to the French fortress of Pinerolo. Victor Amadeus II tried to stop them, but suffered a defeat at Staffarda in August, losing about 4,000 men. Catinat then captured Leuze and later took Susa in November, before winter closed the Alpine passes. After James II fled England in December 1688, Parliament made William and Mary the joint rulers of England and Scotland in February 1689. The change of power was relatively bloodless, but some people in Britain still supported James. In Scotland, James's supporters won a battle at Killiecrankie in July, but their leader died in the fighting, and the revolt soon ended. Ireland posed a bigger challenge because, there, Catholics greatly outnumbered Protestants. The Catholic Earl of Tyrconnell raised 45,000 soldiers for James. With French help, James landed at Kinsale on March 12th and marched to Dublin. William now had to protect his rule in Ireland. In April, Jacobite forces attacked the Protestant city of Derry in Northern Ireland. French forces also arrived at Bantry Bay in the south, where an English fleet tried but failed to intercept them on May 11th. As Louis officially declared war on William in June, James's army fully surrounded Derry. Hunger caused great suffering inside the city, but the defenders held on until English ships arrived in August and broke the siege. In June 1690, William himself arrived in Ireland with 35,000 troops. He met about 21,000 Jacobite and French soldiers at the River Boyne, north of Dublin. On July 1st, James moved his army to stop William from crossing the river. This left another part of his line weaker, allowing William to cross elsewhere. The Jacobite army then faced the risk of being surrounded. Many soldiers retreated in confusion, losing about 1,000. James tucked his tail and fled to France after the defeat, abandoning the Jacobite army. William had won the Battle of the Boyne, but he soon heard bad news from Europe. A day prior, the French Navy beat the Anglo-Dutch fleet at Beachy Head. French troops also attacked and looted Tynemouth in Devon before leaving. News of defeat at Fleurus at the same time made many people fear a French invasion of England. William, however, kept his focus on Ireland and proceeded to secure control of Leinster. In January 1691, the Jacobites received more help from France, including guns, pikes, officers, and engineers. On June 30th, Williamite forces led by Godard de Ginkle captured Athlone and its bridge over the River Shannon. The Jacobites and their French allies tried to stop him at nearby Aughrim. On July 12th, Williamite cavalry broke through a weak point in the Jacobite lines before a cannonball decapitated the French commander, ending the battle. Around 7,000 Irish soldiers died, while about 2,000 Williamite soldiers were lost. After Aughrim, Galway surrendered, and Ginkle began a siege of the main Jacobite stronghold of Limerick in August. On October 3rd, 1691, the Treaty of Limerick ended the war in Ireland. It promised rights for Irish Catholics, and allowed about 12,000 Irish soldiers to leave for France in the Flight of the Wild Geese, continuing to support James while in the service of Louis. After the Protestant victory, new penal laws in Ireland limited Catholic rights. These laws blocked Catholics from holding jobs, owning land, getting an education, and marrying Protestants. Part 3. Inch by Inch. Flanders in 1690 did not see much action in terms of sieges and land gained. This was to change in 1691. Francois Michel de Louvois planned 2 attacks, Mons in Flanders and Nice in Italy. He stored large amounts of food and hay supplies to support the army in Flanders. As he often liked to do, Louis accompanied the army when the siege of Mons began in March. The 51-year-old monarch showed himself near the front to appear as a strong leader. Louis was anxious that a relief army might arrive. He commanded above 46,000 troops against 6,000 defenders in Mons. This large force created supply problems for a similar force nearby, a decision that much displeased Louvois. Heavy guns fired over 7,000 cannonballs and 3,000 mortar shells into Mons, causing fires in the city. The defenders gave up on April 10th, and about 4,500 soldiers marched out. Louis then left for Versailles and gave command in Flanders to Marshal Luxembourg. Luxembourg marched north toward Brussels, raising hail, but avoided battle near Anderlecht when William returned with 56,000 troops. William planned to attack Dinant in July, but Luxembourg blocked him, while Marshal Barfleur's army used up horse food supplies in the Moselle Valley. This made it hard for William's army to move and stopped the attack. Both sides marched and countermarched without a clear victory. In September, Allied Commander Waldeck felt safe to pull his forces back for the winter. To end the 1691 season of Flanders on a high note, Luxembourg marched through heavy mist to launch a surprise attack at Leuze on September 18th. The unprepared Allied cavalry lost about 1,900 in the clash. As mentioned before, Louvois planned for both Mons and Nice to be taken. Nice was important because Allied forces could use it to invade Provence. On March 13th, Catinat captured Villefranche, giving him a port to bring in supplies to attack neighboring Nice. The town fell quickly, but the citadel held out until April 2nd. Catinat lost only about 100 men. At the same time, Max Manuel, the Elector of Bavaria, arrived with 13,000 experienced German soldiers. This increased Victor Amadeus' army to about 45,000 men. In June, a French force besieged Cuneo to keep a winter retreat route open. When the commanders heard that Prince Eugene of Savoy was coming, they panicked and retreated, leaving behind supplies, wounded soldiers, and artillery. The failure at Cuneo made French supply problems worse. A blockade of Pinerolo reduced the flow of food, clothing, weapons, and transport in Italy. Even so, Catinat kept advancing. He captured Aviana, destroyed its defenses, crossed the Po River, and took Carmagnola after a short siege, though a lack of soldiers meant Savoy regained the town in October. Meanwhile, French commander Hogue raided Savoy. He seized livestock, collected money, and destroyed bridges during his withdrawal. These actions stopped Victor Amadeus from helping Montmillion, his last major stronghold in Savoy. Hogue captured the town in August, and forced the citadel to surrender in December, after a long, delayed siege. Louis felt like the campaign in Italy was so successful that Victor Amadeus was offered peace terms. France would keep Nice, Villefranche, Montmillion, and Suza. Victor Amadeus refused, because he expected Austria to send more reinforcements, even though he felt Austrian support sometimes limited his own success. On July 16, 1691, Louvois died suddenly, ending a 30-year career as Louis's dependable Secretary of State for War. After his death, Louis took more direct control of the war and trusted advisors like Vauban. Louvois' death, fortunately, wasn't disruptive. The War Ministry set troop numbers and supplies, and commanders had to work within those limits, a system that helped Louvois control powerful generals in the past. In the winter of 1691 to 1692, French leaders planned to capture Namur in the Spanish Netherlands. Namur sat at the confluence of the Meuse and Sambre rivers, and its seizure could push the Dutch toward peace. Louis marched there in late May with about 60,000 troops. Luxembourg led another large force to protect the siege army, while Vauban ran most of the siege work. Namur had 6,000 defenders led by Menno van Cohorn. He built its citadel on a hill high above the city. Fighting for the citadel focused on nearby forts, like at Fort William, which Cohorn defended in person. Rain and mud slowed the French attacks. After heavy fighting, the citadel surrendered on June 30th, with France losing about 7,000 soldiers compared to the defenders' 4,000. Once again, Louis returned to Versailles and told Luxembourg to stay near William's army. On August 3rd, they fought in the forest of Steenkerque. Rough terrain stopped French cavalry, and the Allies gained ground. Confusion then spread among the Allies, allowing French reinforcements to close gaps in the line. After 9 hours of fighting, William retreated after losing about 10,000 men. The French lost about 7,000, too tired to chase. For the rest of the year, little happened in Flanders. Barfleur captured Furnes in December and forced the enemy to abandon Dixmude in January 1693. While Namur was invested, plans were also drawn up to send French, English, and Irish troops from the Hogue by sea to invade England at the same time. Supporters of the exiled James II believed many English people would join him after he landed, so he felt like he could take back the British thrones easily. About 8,000 French soldiers and 15 Irish battalions were prepared for the invasion. An Atlantic fleet under the Count of Torroella would protect the crossing, while another fleet under Victor Marie d'Estrées sailed from Toulon in the Mediterranean to join him. But ships and crews gathering at Brest were late, and strong winds slowed d'Estrées. Still, Louis ordered Torroella to fight the enemy right away. On May 29, 1692, Torroella met the Allied fleet near Barfleur. He had 44 large warships against Admiral Edward Russell's 99, who had far more cannons to boot. Despite the odds, the French fought well and kept their formation during battle. A fog later helped Torroella break away, with 2 Allied ships now out of battle, and none of his own. The retreat, however, turned into a disaster. Night sailing split the fleet, and saw many ships run aground, get stuck in tides, or slowed by shallow water. Enemy forces hunted them down and burned many. Torroella lost his flagship, the Soleil Royal, before reaching La Hogue with 12 ships. On June 2nd and 3rd, Allied fireships destroyed those 12 remaining large ships, later hunting down 3 more. The major Allied offensive of 1692 took place in southeast France. In July, a large Allied force of 27,000 crossed the Alps into the Dauphine region, helped by local Vaudois guides. Victor Amadeus captured Embrun in August and moved toward Gap, but found it empty and burned. Catinat would not dare to leave Pinerolo, leaving Briançon as key supply hub in the Alps and Grenoble open to attack. The rough mountains stopped the French from cutting off Victor Amadeus' path back to Piedmont, but in August, the Savoyard Duke became ill with smallpox. After this, the Allies pulled back to Piedmont, but not before looting and burning about 70 villages and castles in the Dauphiné. The Duke's illness created fear about who would rule next. He had no son, so the closest heir was his cousin Emmanuel Philibert, the Prince of Carignano. He was deaf and could not speak, but people saw him as intelligent. If Carignano stayed unmarried and without children, the inheritance might pass to Louis Thomas, the Count of Soissons, a brother of Prince Eugene who served Louis in France. But in 1684, Carignano married Angelica Caterina d'Este and later had a son. While sick, Victor Amadeus wrote a will that removed Carignano and named his grandson as heir, with plans for him to marry his daughter Maria Adelaide. Many feared Prince Eugene might use imperial troops to seize Turin and marry Maria Adelaide instead. Fearing the growth of Habsburg influence, Savoy started to warm up to France, who promised support for Carignano's possible inheritance. Part 4. Try something rather than do nothing. France truly started to feel the strain of waging a now 4-year-long war, leading into its 5th in 1693. The treasury was reaching critical levels, heavy war taxes hurt the people, and the colder than average weather of the time had made harvests shaky since the war began. Louis and his advisors believed France had to win in 1693, or risk losing the war. The Duke of Leuze crossed the Rhine in May and quickly captured Heidelberg. This prompted reinforcements to be sent under Louis's son, the Grand Dauphin, for an attack on Heilbronn. But the Dauphin returned when a huge storm destroyed his camps in August, leaving Leuze to watch the enemy Margrave of Baden-Baden by himself. Meanwhile, the French planned an attack on Liège, downriver on the Meuse from Namur. Louis was ill at the time, so the delay allowed William to gather his army. When Luxembourg took Huy in July, William sent the Duke of Württemberg to attack French defences near Ypres and Tournai. Luxembourg used a fake attack on Liège to surprise the now divided allies. At the Battle of Landen on July 29th, Luxembourg avoided the defensive Allied ground by focusing on the villages of Neerwinden and Landen. Neerwinden changed hands several times, finally falling to French troops after 4 hours of fighting. French forces then outflanked William's army and forced it to retreat with 14,000 losses. The French lost 8,000. After the victory, Luxembourg and Vauban captured Charleroi after a month-long siege in the autumn, before retiring for the winter. The capture of Charleroi completed a strong French defensive line that included Mons, Namur, and Huy. Catinat had too few men and too few supplies in Piedmont, so people expected little from him in 1693. In July, Victor Amadeus surrendered Cassel, the French fortress that France had bought in 1681. But the Allies could not fully surround Cassel, so Victor Amadeus bombarded Pinerolo from August to October instead. Catinat could not save Pinerolo because his army had little food, too few mules to move supplies, and almost no money because the French government had not paid its suppliers. but then his army was reinforced from Catalonia, growing to 40,000 men. Victor Amadeus, with 36,000, fell back toward Turin. On October 3rd, Palatinate caught the Allied army at Marsaglia. A bayonet charge from the French right and a cavalry countercharge from the French left caused the Allies to lose about 12,000 men. The victory ended the siege of Casale, but Palatinate still could not capture Turin or Cuneo before winter, because he still lacked supplies and money. At sea, Louis wanted to recover from the defeat at La Hogue. He gave Torroella 70 warships and 25 fireships to attack Allied trade. On June 27th, Torroella defeated the Anglo-Dutch escort near Lagos, Portugal, but his caution let about 3/4 of the massive Smyrna convoy he tried to intercept escape. Later in November, an English fleet tried to attack the privateering port of Saint-Malo in Brittany. A ship packed with gunpowder and shrapnel ran aground too far from the walls, so the blast only damaged hundreds of roofs. France had many victories in 1693: Heidelberg, Landen, Hogue, Charleroi, Marsaglia, and Lagos. None of these brought the decisive victory the Sun King wanted, or, now, needed. Failure of the 1693 harvest brought about a terrible famine, during which France lost 1/10 of its population within a matter of months. Other parts of Europe also had poor harvests, but England and the Dutch Republic used their control of the sea to import grain from the Baltic. The French were willing to use the treaties of Westphalia and Nijmegen as a basis for peace negotiations, but their desire to keep their gains from Ratisbon and see James's Catholic son succeed William meant negotiations did not go far. French agents in Rome also worked with the Pope and Habsburg cardinals to settle who would inherit the Spanish thrones if the weak and sickly King Charles II of Spain died. Leopold believed he had strong rights to the Spanish throne, and refused to settle until peace benefited him. As grain became scarce, bread prices rose. Most people in France already lived in poverty, so that they had little money left for food, clothes, tools, or taxes. This made it even harder to pay for a war that had now lasted for 6 years. Trade also fell sharply because France fought many of its trading partners, who had colonies in the Americas, the Caribbean, and Asia. The crisis forced France to cut naval spending by about 1/4 in 1694. Instead of building a fleet to fight large naval battles, France started to focus on commerce trading, guerre de course. Private captains sailed as privateers to capture enemy ships for profit. Small ships often fell to Allied patrols, but wealthy supporters paid for larger and stronger expeditions. These attacks disrupted Allied trade, forced England and the Dutch to spend more on escorts, and brought France money through captured ships and ransoms. Privateer Jean Bart also kept Allied fleets busy in the North Sea, with battles at Texel in 1694 and Dogger Bank in 1696. The famine hampered any possible offensive that France could make in 1694. The failed harvest meant there was not enough food or supplies to store for the army. Because of this, fighting in Flanders and Germany stayed quiet. In Flanders, William managed to take back Hogue in September. Most fighting that year took place in Catalonia under Marshal Noailles. In the years prior, Noailles often had to send troops to other, more active fronts like Flanders and Italy, limiting what he could do. But since no major battles happened elsewhere in 1694, he received 26,000 soldiers. On May 12th, Leuze crossed the Tur River under fire and pushed Spanish forces out of Bourges, inflicting 5,700 casualties. He then attacked Palamos with help from Admiral Tourville. Once Palamos fell on June 10th, the French besieged Girona, which surrendered at the end of the month with few French losses. Noy planned to move toward Barcelona until Admiral Edward Russell entered the Mediterranean with 50 warships, stopping Noy's advance and forcing Tourville to retreat to Toulon. The Allied fleet later sheltered at Cadiz, keeping alive the threat of intervention if Noy tried to make a move. Another enemy fleet attacked Brest in Brittany. Vauban had strengthened its fortifications and brought in extra troops, so when enemy troops tried to land at Camaret Bay on June 18th, French shore guns and soldiers pushed them back. After this failure, the fleet bombarded Le Havre, Dieppe, Dunkirk, and Calais during the summer. These attacks caused fires and damage, though Vauban's defenses held firm. (1695) began with the death of Luxembourg on January 5th at age 67, regarded at the time as the best commander Louis had. The Duke of Valois was chosen to replace him, though many doubted Valois could match Luxembourg's success against an enemy growing in strength. Thus, combined with the economic difficulties of the previous 2 years, the war in Flanders would be defensive. In July, William led about 80,000 Allied troops to attack Namur, a fortress France had held since 1692. Barfleur defended it with 13,000 soldiers, and it took the French until early August to be forced into the citadel. Louis tried to shift William away from Namur by warning that if attacks on French ports continued, Brussels would be bombarded. William stayed focused on Namur, so Valois fired 4,000 shells into Brussels starting on August 13th, with fires destroying over 3,000 buildings. Menno van Cohorn was now tasked with taking the citadel he had designed, though Vauban had since reinforced and strengthened it. Cohorn's guns made 5 breaches in the walls, but work on the attack trenches slowed due to a lack of funds. A relief army under Valois was scared away on August 30th, but a full assault that same day resulted in heavy Allied losses. With no hope of help, Barfleur surrendered on September 5th. France lost about 8,000 soldiers, while the Allies lost almost 20,000. France also lost Namur, but Barfleur's defense had kept the main Allied army busy for the year. Part 5. Ryswick. Since 1693, Louis had been looking for a way to end the war. He saw Victor Amadeus as the weakest link in the Allied chain. The Duke also wanted peace because the war hurt his lands. He feared Habsburg influence in Italy even more than that of France. In 1695, France and Savoy secretly made a deal. France would give up Cassel after some light resistance. Cassel surrendered on July 9th and was razed. Following this, Victor Amadeus focused on Pinerolo, which had few supplies, weak defenses, and no safe storage for weapons and gunpowder. Victor Amadeus planned to attack if France refused to leave. Louis and his advisors knew they could not hold the town, so they agreed to return it after destroying its defenses instead of losing it in battle. Spies working for William and Emperor Leopold learned about these secret talks. France and Savoy quickly signed the Treaty of Turin on August 29, 1696, France returned Pinerolo, the Duchy of Savoy, and Nice. In return, Victor Amadeus became France's ally. The treaty also arranged the marriage of Louis' son, the Duke of Burgundy, to marry Adelaide. France and Savoy also planned to invade the Spanish Duchy of Milan. Valencia was besieged in December, but before the siege could be completed, Victor Amadeus and Leopold signed the Convention of Vigevano on October 7th, ending the fighting in Italy for the rest of the war. As the war continued, England also ran into serious money problems. Most silver coins in circulation had been clipped, so they had less value. To fix this, Parliament collected all damaged coins and replaced them with new ones at older values, paid for by a new tax. But coins vanished from daily use, trade slowed, and confusion spread. Foreign payments became hard because people no longer trusted English money. Allies like the Dutch became less willing to support England's war plans. Despite the pressure, France still raised about 125,000 troops in Flanders, while William had about half that. Due to the crisis, England and the Dutch could not easily fund or supply their forces, so William could not act. Louis also hesitated, so 1696 saw no big battles. Plans to invade England, assassinate William, and bring back James II failed when spies exposed the plan. In 1697, Villeroy and Vauban besieged Ath, northwest of Mons. The city surrendered on June 5th after a 3-week siege, with Vauban proudly boasting about losses of less than 100 men. France also attacked Catalonia. Spain, though strained, still fought with English and Dutch money and resisted making peace. William, angered, moved his fleet away from Cadiz, which opened the way for France to strike Barcelona in June. The Duke of Vendôme attacked by land and sea, burning supplies with his bombardments and beating away a relief army, with 3,000 Spaniards killed. French mines blasted parts of the walls, and the city surrendered on August 10th. About 9,000 French were killed or wounded, less than Spain's 12,000. Louis hesitated to act in 1696 because peace talks were already happening with William in Savoy, resulting in the aforementioned Treaty of Turin. Leopold, however, did not tell William that he agreed to the Convention of Vigevano, which allowed France to move more troops to fight in Flanders. Leopold also sent his armies to fight the Ottomans instead of France. He wanted the war to continue if Charles II of Spain died. If that happened, William would have to keep fighting France to honor the Grand Alliance. With Savoy leaving the war, Spain and Leopold refusing peace, and England and the Dutch Republic facing a financial crisis, William saw peace as the only solution. During talks in 1696, Louis wanted to base peace on early treaties like Westphalia and Nijmegen. He refused to talk about the Spanish inheritance, and refused to give up key places like Strasbourg. Leopold slowed talks by demanding France give back all its gains since 1684. French victories at Ath and Barcelona in 1697 strengthened Louis's position, pressuring William to start secret talks to bypass official diplomats. These secret talks helped William make peace without Leopold. England, the Dutch Republic, and Spain signed the Treaty of Ryswick with France on September 20th, 1697, ending a hair shy of 9 years of war. France gave up several cities, including Philipsburg, Brissac, Fribourg and Breisgau, and Kiel. It kept Alsace and Strasbourg, but returned to Luxembourg and lands in the Spanish Netherlands to Charles. Louis accepted William as King of England and Scotland and stopped supporting James II. The Dutch gained permission to garrison 8 fortresses in the Spanish Netherlands to protect against France, who replaced its harsh 1667 tariff on Dutch goods with a milder one from 1664. Leopold at first rejected the treaty, still demanding changes in Alsace and the Rhine. But without Allied support, he had no choice but to accept the treaty on October 30th. Historian John A. Lynn writes that, while the French navy had lost at La Hogue, the army had gone from victory to victory, never losing a major battle in the field, and taking several major fortresses at the cost of only a few held by the French. It could be argued that France won the war, but lost the peace. Perhaps, but peace was victory to Louis by 1697, and most of what he had fought for he had retained. In the bigger picture, however, France lost much of its influence in England, while the Dutch gained safer borders and stronger trade. Leopold also felt safer, because French influence near his lands decreased. After Jan Sobieski died in 1696, the Polish-Lithuanian throne was vacant. Louis backed his cousin, the Prince of Conti, while Leopold backed Elector Augustus of Saxony. Augustus was elected on September 15, 1697, 4 days after Prince Eugene crushed the Ottoman army at the Battle of Zenta. Around 30,000 Ottoman soldiers were lost, and their Grand Vizier was assassinated by the Janissaries. This led to peace at Karlowitz in January 1699, seeing the Ottomans lose Hungary and Transylvania to Leopold, Dalmatia and lands around the Aegean to Venice, and Podolia to Poland. In a separate treaty with Russia, Azov was ceded. Austria had just nabbed itself a massive new empire. Historian John B. Wolfe calls the 9 Years' War the First World War, and in many ways this is true. In North America, French and English colonies fought in King William's War. The French and their indigenous allies attacked English settlements in New York and Casco Bay, slowing English expansion and influencing fur trade routes. English militiamen, allied with the Haudenosaunee, captured Port Royal but failed to take Quebec in 1690. Fighting also took place around fur trading posts in Hudson Bay. The war also spread to the Caribbean, where islands such as St. Kitts and Guadeloupe changed stands more than once. Raids repeatedly struck each other's sugar-producing islands. In May 1697, French privateer Baron de Pointiers captured Cartagena in Colombia and carried away 10 million livres worth of loot. Fighting also reached India, where Dutch forces attacked French Pondicherry in 1693. The Treaty of Ryswick later reversed all these gains, though France kept York Factory in Hudson Bay. Both sides immediately understood that the Treaty of Ryswick was a truce. England and the Dutch reduced their armies to save money, but France kept a large army of around 180,000, ready for action. This caused William to worry about a future war. Indeed, when the childless King of Spain died in November 1700, the Grand Alliance, France, Savoy, and Spain would have to fight once again.